Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Pinstriped Prospects Podcast, episode 17 of season number 2. I'm your host, back again, Ricky Keeler. I know I wasn't here last week, but Rob and James did a fantastic job with interviewing Isaiah Gilliam and pitching in for minor leaguers. Rob can fill that in when he joins in a second, but it was a great interview. You definitely should check that out. We have a lot of good topics coming up on the show for you this week. One of the topics we have for you is Rob Metzger, our founder here, wrote about the 43 Yankee minor leaguers that were released. So he's going to come on and going to talk about our favorite players that were released and the background on that. We'll talk more about the minor league stipends. The Nationals made some very unpopular moves, but there are players helping out. And we'll talk about that. We also have an interview scheduled with Ralph of Prospects Live. He's going to cop on. You'll hear that interview. We talk a lot about the MLB Draft, which is next week. So we get the external perspective. Next week we get the internal perspective from a lot of our writers that are doing profiles on different players. They'll hop on the show to talk about it. And then last we'll talk about the whole 50-game season proposal idea and how it's not really a season and it's not really a World Series. But we've had the latest in the MLB versus MLB PA debate going on. We want to remind you can get involved with the show and the website itself. You can tweet us at Pinstripe Pros, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Give us a rating. We hope it's 5 stars. We want to hear from you, what guests you want to hear us have on the show, what topics you want us to talk about. We're just happy to hear from you. So please leave a rating, leave a comment. Feel free to email me as well, rickjkeeler@gmail.com. I am happy to hear from you on that. The site looks different. So joining me right now is our founder, Rob Hipster, is with me this week. James is not here this week. Hopefully back with us next week. Rob, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How's it going?
Doing pretty good. So before we get into the news you had about the Yankee minor league releases, why don't you tell our listeners about some of the changes that are on the site? When they go on the site, it's going to be like, wow, this looks a lot different. Why don't you tell our listeners about it?
Yeah, we spent the last month working on a new look for Pinstripe Prospects and getting it ready. And thankfully, we finished up everything last night and moved the site over to the new look. And it's a really clean, great new look for the website, one that is very easy to read and easy to navigate for our readers, and one that loads a lot faster. I know a lot of people had trouble loading the last website, but this one is a lot easier to load and a lot faster to load. So it's one of the good things about it. And also one of the cool things is now on Pinstripe Prospects is a night mode. So if you click on the little moon icon, it becomes a night mode with a black background and everything. Makes it a lot easier to read, especially on mobile devices. And I encourage you all to check it out. It's a great new look for the website. And in addition to that, we've actually instituted new pricing for our Pinstripe Prospects Dugout membership. And the new pricing is $5.50 per month and $40 per year. And this is for us to keep the site running. Our basic expenses every year come out to about $12,000 to $14,000 a year to run the website, and we want to keep the website going. We want to pay our writers. We want to give our writers a little stipend. No one's getting rich here. We all have day jobs, but it does cost a lot of money to cover the minor leagues, and we want to make sure everyone is covered in what they have to spend to do it. Whether it's trips or equipment or a program or two. We want to make sure there's a stipend, and to get to that point, we need to get 1,500 subscribers at our new price of $40 per year to reach that point. And we hope you all listening sign up for a Pinstripe Prospects Dugout membership. And remember, you can get your first month for free using the promo code IMissBaseball.
And don't we all miss baseball? I think that's the one thing. So definitely check out that. We have great promo codes, and it gives you a chance to check out a lot of the work that we're doing. We have all these great MLB draft profiles that Josh Sabo's been doing that are fantastic. There's so much information in there. You could just dive into. Josh goes into everything in depth. You get those. There's so many different features you get on the site with the Dugout membership. So please take advantage of it. Sign up. We would greatly appreciate that. So let's get into your big story, Rob, where the Yankees on Monday released 43 minor league players. And a lot of people made a big deal out of it, and it is a big deal for sure. Because you've seen a lot of teams cut minor league players. The Mets, I think, had about 39. But I think it's also important to note, while it is a sad time for a lot of these players, you have a case where teams would make these cuts around the end of spring training, around the MLB draft, like I know you guys talked about last week a little bit. None of the names that you'll see that Rob has are surprising. It's still sad for those players. A lot of them could go on to good careers as coaches and things like that. And you saw Royals GM Dayton Moore made a good statement on it to the Athletic when announced the Royals were keeping all their minor leaguers on pay for the rest of the year. Yankees is right now are till I think through the end of June. So what are your thoughts, Rob, on all the releases that the Yankees have made? None of them, I think, are surprising, right?
I mean, there's a couple of names on that list that are surprising to me if we were going to have a minor league season. There's a couple of guys on there that would have been filling in the upper levels and the Class A level wherever the organization needs it. I think with that in mind, it kind of cemented that there will be no minor league baseball this season as in a traditional sense. But a lot of those guys, I'm not surprised they were released. It's a lot of guys that missed a lot of time due to injury, a lot of guys that just weren't performing up to par. But when it comes down to it's just a really shitty time to be releasing guys. And unlike previous years, a lot of these guys will probably have been released had the regular season gone on and at the end of spring training and before the draft. But they would have had the opportunity to continue playing in indie ball or get picked up by another organization. And unfortunately, they don't have that opportunity right now. And these guys are left to fend for themselves. Minor league baseball players do not qualify for traditional unemployment. So it's going to be very tough for them to get a job right now or even go back to school for that matter. But one of the cool things is the Yankees do provide scholarships for those that are released so they could go back to school and learn a trade or get a degree or whatever. So that's a good thing for a lot of these guys because they could go back and get a free education.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the benefits of being in the Yankees organization, and it's a sad time for a lot of these players that don't get a chance, and some might not get another chance. I think that's definitely something to keep in mind. But I want to use this time that we have to talk about some of our favorite players because a lot of these players, Rob, are short season or below, and you and I cover a lot of the short season ball in Staten Island. We've seen a few of these players, so I want us to kind of have the opportunity to talk about some of the players on this list that we got a chance to watch on a daily basis, get to talk to sometimes on a daily basis or often during the year. Who are some of your favorites on this list?
I mean, the one guy that definitely sticks out to me is David Metzger. He was one of my favorite players to watch over the last few years in the minor leagues. He was, to me, a real throwback to the scrappy players of old. If this was the 1950s, he would have been a guy that be one of the guys they keep in the system and bring up to the big leagues because he's like that type of player. He's really an old school type of player, and he played wherever the organization. He was an organizational player in the truest sense of the word. He played at every level. He played against every type of competition. He never was in the same place for more than 30 days. And, he was a true professional about it. And that was one of the great things about him. And I wish him the best of luck. I see him having a good future in his life. And he was just one of my favorite guys to watch in the organization. And I knew he wasn't a big prospect, but to me, those guys, those scrappy underdog guys are some of my favorite guys to watch.
I remember doing a feature on him. He talked about it. If once his career is done, he can go into coaching, and I think that's a guy who you saw coaching a lot of the Yankee young prospect infielders, guys like Ezekiel Duran last year. Learned a lot from David Metzger, so he's definitely gonna have an impact somewhere on somebody's life. He was a good guy to talk to, and I think he's got a good, bright future in whatever he decides to do. One of my favorites on this list is Ryan Lidge. Ryan Lidge is the guy, like you look at the Yankees system, and you and I know it well, catching is not a strong part of their system. They have a good bunch of low-level guys with Anthony Segler and Josh Breaux and Jason Lopez and Donnie Sands, but there's not a lot of high-level depth. So when the Yankees needed some high-level depth to fill in, they call Ryan Lidge. We would always say Ryan Lidge would be that guy that earned the Yankee Frequent Flyer Miles Award for being on the most teams throughout a year. He almost went through the whole Yankee system in one given year, which was pretty impressive. But this is a guy I got a chance to talk to. He's the cousin of former MLB closer Brad Lidge. So you obviously, if you see the last name, it's familiar. Yes, that is true. This is a guy that always was ready to play. Didn't matter where he was. Didn't matter if he had just flown in from one place to another or took a car from one place to another. He was always ready to go and gave it his all. And the one time I got to talk to him, that's a guy that he's probably exemplifies the true minor leaguer. Someone who just loves to play the game, doesn't matter where you're at. And for a 20th round pick, he was able to play in a lot of different places. So I give a lot of credit to Lidge.
Yeah, he's a guy that, like Metzger, where he would play wherever the organization sent him. He didn't stay in the same place for too long. And, he was a true organizational guy. And he was a great guy to have around for the pitchers, a great guy to have around to work with the catchers. So I could see him having a future as a coach. But, and I would say he is definitely one of the guys that kind of surprised me. Like, if there was going to be a minor league season, he would definitely have probably stayed in the organization because they need that depth, especially in the upper levels.
And with the news about that, I think being the big focus this week, it's kind of weird that we're going to probably have in the next week the celebration of players joining Major League Baseball, joining professional baseball, and the cancellation likely of a minor league season. We're down that route. It's kind of weird in a way that we're going to welcome one group of players, but the rest of the group you're not probably playing this year.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is only the beginning. There's going to be no traditional minor league season in this year. There's going to be a contraction next year, and the Yankees are losing at least 105 roster spots, probably a lot more. So when it comes down to it, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be a lot more releases by the end of this year.
So I want to point out a couple of teams that I just feel like one team, you guys talked to the A's last week, but there are a lot of different teams in the news this week. For one, I want to talk about the Washington Nationals, team that got a lot of money off of World Series revenue, T-shirts, hats, etc. Yeah, and they decided, hey, we're going to take your minor league stipend from $400 a week. We're going to go down to $300 a week. And they needed people like Sean Doolittle and the Nationals players to say, we will cover that $100 and more for going forward, for them to change their mind and go back to 400. How weak is that? Because to me, that is a weak move by the team to dare go from 400 to 300.
100%. Like I said, like releases and everything is just a bad time for it, and I think it's a bad look. It's not as bad as what the Oakland A's are doing, but to me, it just these are billionaires. The small amount of money they'll save from doing this is not worth the bad publicity, and it just goes to show you how little people think ahead and when it comes to everything. And like, to me, if I was a non-drafted free agent out of this year's draft, I'm going to see who's paying their minor league players for the rest of the year, who released minor league players, and who stuck by them. And if everything's equal over at $20K for a bonus, I'm going to go to the people who kept all their minor league players, the guys who paid all their minor league players to the end of the season, and the guys that did not do anything to hurt them. It is going to be a big differentiator for everyone in this year's draft with those new rules.
Exactly. And why should players, if we look at the Dodgers, for example, why should David Price, and good on David Price for doing this, but for giving every Dodger player in the minor league organization $1,000 in the month of June, every player in the league. The guy hasn't pitched a game in the organization yet, and he's doing that. So good on David Price. But why do the Dodgers even put him in a position where he feels like he has to do this? Like, for the owners for trying to win, the players are looking like the good guys more often than not in this. And we'll get more to that later, but I just want to dive into that.
100%. And, it gives the players the edge in the PR war for the negotiations for the season as well as for the PBA. But make no mistake, Major League Baseball players, these are nice gestures, but what they need to do is have the union begin to represent minor league baseball players. They need to bring minor league baseball players into the players union for anything to happen on a grander scale.
Now, I wasn't here last week, so I wanted, of course, allow you to talk about the interview you did with Isaiah Gilliam and the folks on pitching in for minor leaguers last week as well. To add on to this, I don't know if you saw the Instagram post by Mets second round pick in the past, Andrew Church.
Oh,
It
yeah.
kind of goes into depth, like what you guys were all talking about with the tough parts of minor league life. What Andrew Church went through to play while the Mets bring in Tim Tebow, and I didn't see Tim Tebow on those 39 cuts, did I?
No, 100%. He was not on there. And, quite frankly, he deserves to be. He's not a baseball player. He was only brought in for the publicity. He was given a signing bonus to get publicity, and that's it. And when it comes down to it, he's taking spots away from actual baseball players that deserve to be there. And to me, that's just sad. And the thing I really want to stress is, the Yankees take care of their players better than most of the other organizations do. But they're not perfect. And minor league life is still very hard. These players still don't get paid a lot. And the Yankees, unfortunately, play in places where, it's a little bit more expensive. Their short season team is in New York City itself. You got guys in AA in Trenton where they go into the city on off days. So it is not all what a lot of people make it out to be. Minor league baseball life is still difficult for these guys. They're sleeping 4 or 5, 6 people to a room. They're trying to save money anywhere so they could support their families, support their children. And there's a lot of things out there. So everyone listening, please go out there, take a look at pitching in for minor leaguers. Take a look at minor league baseball advocates. Adopt minor league baseball players. And more than baseball, these guys are helping out minor league baseball players pursue their dream and keep the dream going because they need the help. And I've been around minor league baseball for almost 2 decades now. And as much as I love it, there's all things that need to be changed about it.
Definitely be sure to check out those sites. Check out the interview that we did last week. James and Rob did a fantastic job on that interview, so be sure to check that out. We're going to lead into, of course, now our MLB Draft portion of the show. As I mentioned, next week we're going to be doing more of an internal preview where most of us, the guys here at Pinstriped Prospects, we're going to get together and we'll talk about some of our favorite players going into the draft because we're going to record the night before the actual draft. So it gives us a chance to kind of look at the profiles we've already discussed, kind of figure out where the Yankees might go and look at the organization from an internal perspective to see where they might lean in certain aspects, and we're going to do that next week. We want to do an external preview this week, and to do that, we brought in Ralph, who is one of the big main writers over at Prospects Live. They're going to be a big part of the ESPN draft coverage. That takes place next week. Yes, it's both ESPN and MLB Network. They're doing draft telecasts next week. Round 1 is on June 10th at 7 Eastern. Round 2 is on June 11th at 5 Eastern, rounds 2 through 5. So day 1, day 2, both ESPN and MLB networks, you can pick and choose who you want to go to. But we have, I think, some really good questions for Ralph. Ralph talked about the latest Yankee pick in his mock draft. We got to some different players. We dove into some possible guys that Yankees could get as undrafted free agents. That would be interesting fits, and I think you'll definitely enjoy this interview as an added preview to the draft coverage we've already done here. So without further ado, enjoy our conversation between myself, Rob, and Ralph from Prospects Live. We'll be back to talk about it and much more after this. Joining us now here on the Pinstriped Prospects Podcast is someone that I think is one of the best minds out there talking MLB Draft, has a great site, Prospects Live. Myself and Kyler Peterson works at Prospects Live. We're Yankee general managers on the Prospects Live mock draft about a month ago. We had a lot of fun making a couple Yankee picks, so we wanted to bring Ralph on to talk about the draft and some of the Yankees ideas as well from Prospects Live. Ralph, how you doing, my friend?
Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on. Excited to join you, talk a little draft.
Happy to have you. So before we get into the draft talk, I want to let you tell our listeners, Prospects Live is going to be involved in some cool things at the draft. Not only will you guys have something going on the site, but from what I understand, your video is going to be on the ESPN broadcast next week, so that has to be pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really unexpected, but not only because I number one, I had no idea that ESPN was going to be doing a draft broadcast. I mean, it kind of makes sense. They're looking for content for obvious reasons, but yeah, so we try to attack a bunch of different mediums. YouTube is a big part of it. Kyler Peterson, who's also on our team, is a massive part of our video collection. And we were lucky enough to have ESPN reach out to us and ask for clearance on, I think, about 49 different videos, mostly prep, because they obviously have access to college video because of all the college video games that they, actually own and broadcast. So to be able to be a resource to ESPN and get some of that reach is pretty cool. On the other side of things, we're going to be running our own, I guess, somewhat competing broadcast. So I'm sure ESPN isn't too worried about Little Prospects Live and their YouTube Periscope. But we're going to do something similar to what we did with the mock draft. Obviously, less folks involved, in terms of we don't have, team-specific prospect sites like yourselves representing, their team of coverage. But we'll have a bunch of different folks on. We'll have Chris Blessing on from Baseball HQ, who actually can't talk about the draft publicly until the draft because he works as an area guy for a particular major league organization. So it'll be interesting to have some of that insight and some of that information that wasn't necessarily publicly available, especially considering he works Georgia. There's a lot of interesting players, in that area of the country. So, we've been doing all these draft preview videos with the help of Brian Sikowski of perfectgame.org. Which, he's a great guy and obviously, great content that they put out as well. But we've just really dove, all of our resources into covering the MLB draft and had a lot of fun in the process. And I guess it's all kind of ramping up to a week from now where, there won't be a whole lot to cover probably as a minor league guy, in a minor leagues focused site. So we'll find our ways, but we're having a lot of fun with, all the rankings and everything else that we've been able to put out there, information, and just, interact with folks that are interested in the MLB draft. I think a lot of them, maybe even for the first time, because, it's kind of front and center because there's not a whole lot else going on.
There's so much to dissect in a 5-round draft. It's obviously new to everybody this year. What's the one storyline you're looking forward to watching next week?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is how teams are going to utilize their bonus pools, because there's a pretty big discrepancy. If you look across the board, it almost seems like just in terms of what the slot bonuses are, because of the 5-round draft, it feels like everything is just significantly magnified. I mean, you take a look at, the Red Sox at $5 million, Twins at $4.5 million, Braves at a little bit over $4 million. You have the Yankees that are down there, and I mean, in terms of actual bonus all there's some teams that have significantly more. You look at the Orioles, the Tigers, Royals, Marlins, Pirates. All have upwards of $11 million to potentially spend. And a team like the Royals, to me, is really interesting because they pick at 4. I believe they pick again at 32 and 41. So they have, 3 picks essentially within the top 40, and they have $12.5 million to spend. They could do some creative things where you may see a guy like Landon Knack go to them in like the second round, and they could sign him for $100,000 and then bonus bump, a really talented prep or who even knows, maybe like a draft eligible sophomore to like the, 3rd round. It's possible. There's a lot of wacky stuff that could happen with these bonus pools. I don't know if it necessarily plays out like that, but the more you dig into it, the more the wheels start to turn. And you're like, there's just so many more possibilities in terms of the really crazy stuff that could happen that only happens in the MLB draft because of the bonus pool system.
Now, one of the things that your site has done on YouTube, which I've enjoyed, is the team breakdown. So Joe Doyle, who works for your site as well, also, you guys were talking about different teams, and I watched the one on the Yankees, and one of the things I took from it is the Yankees are very unpredictable. You don't seem to know which direction they're going until about draft night, and you're like, oh yeah, I could see that, but I didn't really think that. With only 3 picks this year, how big a draft is this for them, especially since, I mean, they made the big international signing with Dominguez, but being with the team with the fewest picks in the draft, how do you consider this draft in terms of the Yankee organization, how crucial it is for them?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. In terms of the MLB draft, the Yankees, I guess, more or less recently have had a somewhat checkered history. Jury's out on Schmidt, of course, who I think is going to be a major league contributor. they're one of the best teams in the international market. I mean, it's beyond obviously just Jason Dominguez. Consistently, they find talent, even in some of the lower, bonus areas. And they're able to develop these guys and churn them out into, at least decent, minor league talents, depth guys. They've had a lot of that, a lot of relief arms. But there always seems to be some consistency coming there that sort of offsets it. And then we know of course about, the amount of money, that, they obviously wield. There's a lot of teams like that, the Red Sox, the Dodgers. And I think that beyond that, Cashman makes a lot of savvy moves just in terms of trades and pickups and things like that, I don't know if a draft is ever like really important for the Yankees, simply because they do so many other things as an organization really well.
True. I think also they've built up a lot of lower level prospect depth to the point where you don't really need the draft pick that you make to make that big leap because there's so much competition. And that's what made, I think, the mock draft that you guys had up on the site recently, and you brought up the name Carson Tucker, brother of Cole Tucker, shortstop, a prep player as well. And for me, I think looking at the Tucker pick, and I want to get your thoughts on him being how good a fit he'd be with the Yankees, but I'm kind of confused by it just because, yes, you take this player, but they've taken Anthony Volpe in the last year. They took Kyle Holder. And they have guys like Oswald Peraza and Josh Smith, infielder. They've drafted so many middle infielders. How would Tucker fit in your mind?
Yeah, I think the thing is with Carson Tucker, is he's a guy that might have been hurt a little bit by the shutdown, just simply because he was kind of bubbling already. A lot of teams saw him. I know the Yankees area scouts were all over him. Eric Longenhagen, I know I'd mentioned that, and I think his mock draft as well. And the Yankees spend a lot of money on scouting. They do a good job of scouting, and I don't worry so much about past history and Volpe and some of those guys. I understand he was obviously a local kid, coming out of Del Barton, which is not too far down the road, maybe 40, 50 minutes from the stadium. But for me, Tucker's one of these guys where everything I hear, because I haven't seen Tucker personally, everything I hear from guys that I work with that see these players from the time they're 15 and up is Tucker's a big mover, and there's a lot more organizations on Tucker right now than just the Yankees. And one of the reasons for that is he's a really talented player that wants to get into professional baseball. We know his brother, so he's got some pedigree as well there. But beyond that, he's willing to take a lower slot. So I'm sure teams that are maybe strapped for cash, can grab a guy like that in the first round for less and maybe get a better player in the second or third round, or maybe both with their picks, just simply because it allows them to play a little bit more with the bonus pool. So I think that's one of the things that makes Tucker more attractive, but that doesn't necessarily mean, that you should underrate the bat or, the fielding ability, or just the actual makeup of the player. Because I think with Tucker that, you're talking about a more talented hitter, than Anthony Volpe, in my opinion. And he's played against higher level competition, quite frankly.
When you look at a team like the Yankees that has those only 3 picks, and it's a question I've kind of looked at when thinking about different picks the Yankees could make. With their first pick at 28, is it better to prioritize high floor or low or high ceiling?
I just think with, based off of depth, the Yankees really should be going probably more ceiling at that point, which is why Tucker's probably a good fit. But there's other guys that you can go in this draft that have some decent ceilings, depending upon how you can project them out. Positionally, one of those guys that I know the Yankees organization had some interest in was Austin Wells. And Wells is a guy that, in terms of the metrics, batted ball metrics, they're excellent. He's one of these guys that just barrels up. And that's true barrels too, like just in terms of like actual measurements of, launch angles and exit velocities. This is a guy that makes tons of hard contact consistently. He did it with Wood down the Cape. If you look at some of the plate discipline numbers, he was a little bit aggressive down the Cape, but that's not necessarily who he was at Arizona. I just think he was seeing beach balls, and sometimes those numbers get a little bit wacky when guys, are just hitting everything. I mean, he hit over 300. Other than Nick Gonzalez, Austin Wells was probably the most impressive player down the Cape in 2019 over the summer. He's a guy that I don't think is going to stick behind the plate, but he played all three outfield positions. He's definitely not going to stick in center. Would ever played center, other than Cape Cod League, where we'll do goofy stuff like that. But he's got enough arm and enough legs. He's a pretty athletic guy. You could probably stick him in right. You could certainly stick him in left. And I think the bat plays at a corner. He's another guy I've seen the Yankees linked to, and he kind of is a nice middle ground because there's certainly some risk there just in terms of what his position ends up being. But I also think he's really safe in terms of he is a college performer that did perform down the Cape, in front of everybody consistently. And we'll see what catchers are like in the future too. I guess if robo umps are coming, then that could potentially change how the position is viewed. The issue with Wells doesn't have that strong of an arm. So for me, I don't know if I'm kind of not answering the question, but I don't know if I would necessarily look at it that way. I think this draft is so deep that even picking at 28, 27, 28, 29, all those teams in the back end, they're still going to get really good talents. They could get some of the better players in the draft when we look back 2-3 years from now, just simply because of how much of a crunch of talent there really is within those first 40 picks or so.
And Wells, I think, even fits with the Yankees just because I'll get into this later, a redraft candidate. So the Yankees are very familiar with him. And in a time where you're not able to do as much scouting as you would like with the pandemic, having guys you're familiar with, I think, is a benefit. Guys you've scouted before, even drafted before. And with Anthony Segal and Josh Breaux around the same level of catcher, if you have to move Wells to a different position, you at least know he's capable of playing that position. You don't have to teach him from square one. You could kind of go a little bit more into the advanced stuff and still keep his bat in the lineup.
Yeah, he's a tall, and he's probably 6'2", and he's not super stocky. He's just sort of muscular and strong, kind of athletic. He moves pretty well, especially for a catcher. And he's a lefty power bat, so lots of like there. That plays at a lot of different positions.
So if you're the Yankees here, Ralph, do you go hitter or pitcher in round one?
Yeah, I think I'm going hitter. I feel like the organization as a whole needs to build up some positional depth in the draft. At least I'd like to see that, And one of the things I guess I'm now I'm not answering the previous question. I'd like to see Wells because I'd like to see a guy that moves a little faster. Maybe for my own selfishness, so I could get the looks in AA and AAA, but especially with Worcester being built down the road from my house, next year. So yeah, I'd actually like to see them go with somebody like Wells and a positional player with a bat that can move a little quicker. I don't feel like they've had anybody like that in a while.
I think bat especially, and I think one of the things you talked about just a little while ago, the depth in this draft. You could get good college pitching in the third and fourth round for the Yankees, and I don't really think they have to stress taking a college pitcher unless they really, really like that college pitcher.
Yeah, agree. And the other thing is, I feel like they always kind of pluck a couple of guys every year in the later rounds that are really talented arms that nobody was thinking about, like Tanner Myatt or something like that. Trevor, Steven, there's all these different arms that I feel like they've plucked that weren't necessarily, buzzy names coming into the draft that have been, decent prospects that potentially have, a major league role. It might be a role 40, but, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Tanner Myatt. He was a guy that was drafted in the 11th round a few years ago. Yep. And with the Yankees only having 3 picks this year and the shortened draft, who are some of the guys we should take a look at that will become undrafted free agents?
There's a name, and I haven't heard any teams that are on him. It's a bat. It's a positionalist bat. It's actually a teammate of Austin Wells in Yarmouth Dennis, and that's South Carolina, and I'd say quotation marks left fielder Noah Campbell. This dude raked 2 summers in a row with Wood down the Cape against good pitching. He's a switch hitter. Good batted ball metrics. He's more of a line drive hitter, but I think you could add a little loft to his swing. I think this kid's going to hit. I don't know if he has a position because he's a terrible fielder. I mean, even in left field, he made some bad errors. There was a game against Clemson with Carmen Majinski on Friday night, and he made an awful play in left. Like it was like rudimentary type of stuff. And he just took a terrible route, and then like his hands are stoned. So you're gonna have to figure that out. But he's an undrafted guy that I legitimately think the bat could play, just simply because he's hit with wood. There's a track record there. He's a switch hitter. There's power, and there's good plate approach. So he's a guy that I think is really, really interesting. I'm wondering if a team drafts Mason Hickman or not. I know the fastball isn't really. It's not hard. I mean, he throws 88 to like 91. But he's a guy that's, pitched for Vandy. He will miss bats. There's really good, metrics in terms of actual like true spin on his fastball and some of his secondaries that I wonder if he's, like a back end starter long term. But a team would be happy to get a number 5 starter as an undrafted free agent or, even like a late round pick, a 5th round pick or something like that. But Hickman's another guy that maybe he gets drafted, but there's a good chance that, potentially he doesn't. And he could be really interesting. And another name I want to throw out there too, and maybe he also gets drafted, is Joe Boyle, who's a giant. He's like 6'7", 6'8", pitches for Notre Dame, and he throws an easy 100 miles an hour. He's got a pretty decent slider. I feel like he's one of these guys that an organization like the Yankees would make him into a reliever probably, and they would utilize his skill set and probably be able to maximize what he does well and figure out what he doesn't do well and make a more efficient thrower. But Boyle's a really interesting name just because when you have a guy that's that big that throws that hard and you're talking about a fastball that ranges from 2,400 to 2,600 raw spin, there's a lot that a savvy analytical team could do with that. So he's another name that I think could be an undrafted free agent that will be interesting. It's going to be all college guys because I bet there's maybe 30 preps that sign in this draft.
So looking at it, another pitcher I feel like I've seen in so many mock drafts from some of these big publications, and I'm very interested in it for the Yankees, about Louisville right-hander Bobby Miller.
Miller would be an interesting choice for them. He's a guy that definitely popped this year. He added some velo, and now he's pumping an easy 98 consistently. I was watching one of his starts the other night. Command control issues. It comes and it goes. Secondaries will move, but they get real firm. Particularly his changeup, but he'll get some drop on it. And he's got a tight slider as well. But I like Miller as a guy that the right organization, could potentially maximize and turn into a good starting pitcher. But the question with him is command and control. But I think that, he's a guy that probably has an easy relief floor just simply because the stuff is so good. And he's kind of got a bulldog mentality on the mound like a lot of those Louisville guys do. So I like Miller, I don't think that'd be a bad pick there. There's a lot of starters there, and he's one of the few college guys who truly has some upside beyond what he's even shown, just simply because in his breakout season he got shut down. Ian Seymour is another guy like that. And I guess to like a lesser extent, there's some guys like later in the draft, like Jared Schuster and Sam Weatherly, another arm lefty from Clemson that, were pitching pretty well. And, had they had a full season, they potentially could have leapfrogged some other guys that are ahead of them.
Yeah, Jared Schuster, I actually found interesting. I did a profile for him on Pinstriped Prospects, and going through what he did this past year before the pandemic, this year or last year, he outdueled Bobby Miller in a start. So I think that is impressive. I think you also look at the Yankees right now, they got so many right-handed arms. TJ Sycamore, I got a chance to watch last year in Staten Island. The deception from the left side I thought was impressive. And the Yankees don't really have a lot of left-handed top pitching prospects. Sycamore's the only one. So I think Schuster would be a real intriguing name to him, just add more left-handed depth.
Yeah, I don't know. He'd have to change allegiances though. That's a good New Bedford, Massachusetts boy. That means he's a little tough though. Bedford's a tough town. It's where I actually went to college down there. But yeah, so I like Schuster a lot. That would be a good pick. And he's a guy that had, 90 to like 92 mile per hour stuff when I saw him down the Cape with a pretty good changeup. And that, pitching lab at Wake Forest has done some miraculous things with some different arms. And he in particular is a major success story coming out of that program right now, because he was pumping 95, 96. If you watch that Louisville start, actually, he was holding it too in third, fourth, fifth inning. And that's a plus changeup. That's an easy plus changeup. I don't know if it's better than Ian Seymour's, who's another mass guy. There's a couple mass arms in this draft, but it's up there. It's one of the better changeups in the draft. And it's got like drop and tumble on it, like a breaking ball,
So one of the things I mentioned a little bit earlier for the Yankees, with the lack of scouting familiarity this year, you're not able to see as many guys live as you would like, of course, with the pandemic, is the redraft possibilities. And there are so many for the Yankees. We talked about Austin Wells, a guy we drafted in the Prospects Live mock draft, Tanner Burns. So I guess teams listened, and he's now going to go higher than that. So I feel like we helped Tanner Burns a little bit, but he definitely, I think, won't be there. But Bryce Jarvis at Duke. My question would be, how much you think the redraft option, being the Yankees seem to draft a lot of guys, Cole Wilcox, another late round pick a few years ago, that's going to get picked early in this draft. How much does that help?
I don't know. I'm not sure. It probably differs from guy to guy, right? I don't know if they'll have enough money to sign Wilcox if he dropped. There's a possibility. I think if he doesn't sign by that point, he's probably going back to Georgia for another year, because he's a draft eligible sophomore, of course. Wells, maybe it helps, especially if maybe it was close, or there's some relationship with the organization and they stayed in touch, obviously. I think it's certainly possible. Burns, on the other hand, I don't think Burns is going to be there, but he'd be an interesting guy, because I feel like he could move really fast in that organization. His command of that fastball was something else. It's not the best fastball in the draft, simply because of like Lacey and some of these other guys, but he might have the best command of his.
Wilcox is created as a Nationals first round pick, or not a first round pick, but a Nationals pick. But still, I would like Cole Wilcox, the Yankees, but that's not going to happen.
Wilcox got drafted by the Yankees, but I was like, roll.
That's what I thought. I had to look up just to make sure. Wait a second, but still, I would like, he would be a good fit, but he won't be there at all. But there's a lot of good depth in that, right? I mean, JT Ginn. There's so many different. Slade Ciccone from Miami. I mean, the list of right-handed pitchers in the late first round is insane, and I think it adds to my question with the news we got earlier tonight as we recorded this. Dylan Cruz is going to LSU, and he was one of those guys, a prep player that could have been a late first-round pick. How does that affect the bottom of the first round?
I don't think it crunches it too much, simply because a lot of this has to do with the fact that Cruz was looking for big-time money, like $3 million to sign, and nobody wanted to give him $3 million in the second round. He kind of got crunched down behind a few guys. I even think I know for a fact there's teams that like Isaiah Green more than Cruz coming into today. And I think that probably wore him a little bit. And it makes sense for him to go back to school, because he's not going to get the dough that he wanted to get. So I don't know how much it impacts much, other than maybe a name that you would have been dreaming your team could snatch up with a high bonus second round pick, where they're paying him more than the guys that are drafted the 20 picks in front of them or something. But I don't think it crunches a ton, but it does make the prep hitting class a little bit thinner, simply because Cruz was a pretty good arm, probably behind my top 5 or 6.
And that's what I think might make, like we talked about earlier, the Tucker pick interesting if the Yankees do make that pick, because there's not a lot of prep options in the first round. I mean, you guys talk about it a lot with guys like Austin Hendricks and Zach Veen. I mean, really, besides a couple of guys in the top 15, you're not going to see a lot of prep position players go pretty early. I mean, there are a couple guys I like late. Guy I drafted in the mock draft, Caden Wallace, I like with his exit velos, but you're not going to get a lot of big time prep position players where it might be a priority to get one early because you don't know if they're going to sign or go to college or junior college or take a different direction.
Yeah. I think, with some certainty, I think we know that there's guys at the top of the draft that will sign. Veen, Hassel, Hendrick, Soderstrom will sign. Bitsko maybe doesn't sign. I'll get into that one in a minute. I think Kelly signs. I don't think he gets on campus. And I definitely think that Abel signs. I don't think Abel gets on campus. You can guarantee some of those guys, they're pretty locked in. After that, there's some uncertainty with a lot of those players. I think Isaiah Green probably signs. I think Ed Howard signs. There's some of those bigger names. But there's a lot of guys in the middle, like a guy like Jake Vogel, who's a super talented player that probably gets to UCLA just simply because no one's going to pay his number, PCA probably signs. And Bitsko is interesting. Bitsko reclassified from 2021 to 2022 because he would have been an older player for that class. And, obviously that knocks prep guys. UVA commit. We know UVA has a history, Savino and some of these other guys, Mike Vassell a couple of years ago, of getting some of these top arms to campus early. There's some rumors now that he may not sign. I still think he gets picked in the top 20, so I think someone's going to pay him enough money that he will sign. But you never know. That could be another one that sort of drops, and there's some ripple effects there.
One of the names you brought up that I actually tweeted you about, so now I get a chance to ask you about it. They got Ed Howard was the name I saw Jim Callis mock to the Yankees, and it's the first time I've heard of him. And I did not know the backstory of he was on that Illinois Little League team that got their title taken away, which I thought was pretty fascinating. But I've seen him in like top 10, top 15. I was like, wait, I never thought of him option late. What do you like about Ed Howard?
Yeah, I think Howard's one of these guys that he's athletic enough. He's a good defender. He's going to stick at shortstop long term. If you watch him hit, I think the right team, the right hitting coach can make a few adjustments and get into a ton more power from his lower half. And you could have a power hitting shortstop. Maybe not a guy, he's not going to be like, tools off the charts. He's not CJ Abrams. But he's an instinctual, good ball player, which is why he's going to stick it short because he has good instincts in the field. He makes good decisions. He's got a good first step, good throwing arm, and he shows the athleticism and upside to be, a good power hitter. There's some plate approach that needs to be ironed out a little bit, but he is a performer, and he's probably without a doubt in my mind the top prep shortstop in the draft. I don't think there's too many guys that are close, quite honestly.
So, question I have for you, and I asked this to a lot of different draft people, and I want to get your take. Not the best player, your favorite player in this draft class that you will go to the mat for and stick up for to any argument. Who's that guy?
Ooh, it's probably Daniel Cabrera. I've been a big fan of Cabrera from LSU, outfielder, since I saw him down the Cape. And he homered off of Patrick Fredrickson from Minnesota, who was on Bourne. And Fredrickson hit him he's got a wicked changeup, and he hit him with a wicked changeup, like in an 0-1 count. Cabrera, eats it, just total sword on it, and hits it back with a couple of fastballs. Cabrera, fouls him off, comes back with the same changeup, and Cabrera hit the ball probably about 430 feet out to like right center field. He's got this like super fluid swing. Next at bat, he goes opposite field for a double down the line. Just a pitch on the outer part of the plate. He's got a really good hit tool. He's got another orthodox swing a little bit of a linear bat plane. He does create power. He's got good bat speed, but he's got kind of a funky setup. Part of it is it's one of these things where it's to his benefit because his hands are so unique that he can really make adjustments within at bat, even within mid swing, sort of make sure that he does make contact and sort of push stuff. In some ways he's old school like that, but he can turn a ball, and most of his power is to his pull side. he'll get exploited a little bit by spin, like down and in. But he hasn't really gotten eaten up on it yet, simply because even in the SEC, he's a good enough hitter that he doesn't get exposed. So he'll be a guy to sort of watch, because I think he's one of these guys that's going to hit the ground running in pro ball. He's probably relegated to a corner, probably left field long term. But I don't think he's going to be like a bad outfielder. He's got a good arm, he's got good instincts, he moves pretty well underway. There's just probably going to be a better right fielder on your major league team, so you probably won't want to start him in right field, but he's got power. He can actually run a little bit. He's got good instincts as a base stealer. One of those guys that, the home to first times are, 45s, when he's really, really going. But he can steal bases, and I think a lot of it just comes out of his ability to read a pitcher, and I think that translates to all of his game. He's a smart ball player, He's somebody a team's gonna end up plucking the second round, and people are gonna ask why he wasn't a first round pick, because I think he can hit. I think he's a guy that's gonna hit, at peak, like you could be talking about 280 batting average, 20 homer upside, and he plays a decent left field for you.
Definitely not a bad option. I remember seeing him at the back of the first round in a few mocks as well, so that's another option for the Yankees to consider. Ralph, again, thanks for hopping on. Remind the listeners how they can follow you, how they can follow Prospects Live, and anything else you want to add, feel free to do so.
Sure, yeah. So prospectslive.com, at Prospects Live on Twitter. We also have at Prospects Live Vid, which is Prospect Live Videos, which any content that we have coming out, as well as tons of different draft videos, prep players, 2021 guys, 2023 guys even. We have video that gets tweeted out from there. You can follow me on Twitter at ProspectJesus, it's my silly name. And thank you. Thanks for having me on, and just continue to support the site and keep doing all the great work you guys do.
Absolutely happy to have you. Keep up the great work. Good luck with the draft telecast, and we'll talk again real soon to find out how the Yankees did.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck.
And our special thanks again to Ralph from Prospects Live for hopping on the show. Definitely enjoy his insight. This guy we got to definitely have on again, and we thank him for allowing us at Pinstriped Prospects to be a part of their MLB mock draft that we did with them about a month ago. It was a lot of fun. Looking forward to doing more things with them in the future. Rob, I know we'll talk about it a little bit more next week when we go through our big draft preview. What are you looking forward to most in this draft?
I can't really say I'm looking forward to really much. I think it being a shortened draft and the Yankees having only 3 picks, kind of hurts it for me. To me, I think this just shows how much the Yankees are being punished for bettering their team the right way. And, teams like the Astros, who are getting an extra pick because the Yankees signed Garrett Cole, even though the Astros were caught cheating. And I just feel like this draft specifically really hurts the Yankees more than any other team because of how they were penalized for signing Garrett Cole when they shouldn't have been. And I think draft pick compensation for signing free agents needs to end. And let me just leave it at that before I go on a rant.
Save that for next week. We might need that rant for next week. But I agree. I think I understand that there's part of the Yankee fan base that is not that enthusiastic about this year's draft because of all what's gone on in baseball with the MLB versus MLBPA fighting, with the likely cancellation of a minor league season, with not very much going on positively in the baseball landscape. It definitely diminishes the enthusiasm, because I know one of the things we always enjoyed with the MLB draft coverage here is talking to these guys that get taken on day 3 and seeing the enthusiasm they have about getting a chance to play professionally. I think that's one of the best things about writing on a minor league centric site, is getting those guys just want to live up their dream. And at the same time, now you're seeing less guys get a chance to have that dream this year and maybe even in future years, as more and more dreams get cut by all the releases. It just kind of changes the whole landscape of everything.
100%. And, one thing I just don't get, why the draft is only 5 rounds. Why the hell is it on 2 days? Like, that's just stupid to me. Start the draft earlier than the day and do the whole thing in one day. You don't need 5 minutes in between each pick. Back in the day, the whole draft used to be rapid fire with less than a second between each pick. I can understand having a couple minutes just to do commentary and everything on the broadcast, but you don't need 5 minutes in between each pick. Just do the whole thing on one day, and since it's 5 rounds, I think I don't know. It's just Major League Baseball owners and the commissioner's office have dumbfounded me with what they're doing. To me, everything they do is more to hurt the game of baseball than help it, and I think a lot of people that are going into this draft see it, and I think you're going to lose out a ton of talent because of it.
Speaking of the MLB losing people, we have the latest update in the MLB-MLBPA negotiations. On Sunday night, Evan Drelk from The Athletic reported the Players Association's proposal of having a 114-game season, which would be between June 30th and October 31st. Deferrals would take place for missed games, of course, obviously with October, November, with the postseason potentially. If you had the second wave, that would play in a factor, but there would be opt-outs for players that did not want to play. They would cover 70% of their original salaries. Well, let's just say MLB did not like that and wants to propose a 50-game season with a full prorata that would only pay players 30% of that number. And to me, Rob, they called it, if Rob Manfred says, you know what, I'm exerting my power and we tried and I'm doing 50 games, I don't want a World Series. I don't want it to be called anything but a World Series. I don't want a World Series trophy. It's not a season. It's a glorified tournament. That's it. To me, 50 games would mean the season's over. To my mind, it's just one big extended tournament.
Oh, I agree 100%. One, I actually don't think it's going to be 50 games. I think, in my view, it seems like both of these sides know where it's going to end up, but none of them want to actually propose it just yet because they're just in a dick measuring contest and just negotiating for the sake of negotiating. Both sides need to cut the shit and just get the agreement because that's what's best for the game and best for everyone involved. And I don't see it happening because of ego right now, and unfortunately.
Yeah, I totally get that. For the players, 114 games is too much. You can't go from June 30th to first off, you can't go, okay, we agree to a deal and then play in 3 weeks. That's really tough to do, especially you got to ramp players up. And then how are you going to get 114 games in 124 days, even though you're keeping everything regional? That's a tall order. I get that. I think 82 is perfect. It's half a season. It's enough where you don't have to have the Pirates, let's say, go 31-19 and make the playoffs in a year where they might have lost 10 out of 12 over the next 2 weeks in a regular season. You weren't built as teams to play 50-game seasons. You were built for marathons. You were not built for glorified sprints. So it's about trying to find that happy medium. And, hey, give the players half. It's not hard. You have money. You might not have a lot of money, but you have money. Like, I don't want to hear. I think I saw earlier on Tuesday, Tom Ricketts from the Chicago Cubs, and I'll find that quote for you in a second, about commenting on the losses and that might happen. And I'm like, okay, but the players are losing a ton too.
Yes, I saw that quote and everything. What it comes down to, it's going to end up being about 76 to 80 games. Like a short season, like one of the short season leagues that MLB is so bent on eliminating. That's what MLB is going to become this year, a short season league. And they make more than enough money through media rights to pay every player's prorated salary. For them to say they don't is a crock of shit. And until MLB teams, all of them, release all their books, including all the revenue they get from their ownership of TV networks and real estate around the stadiums, it's going to be a fight. And until these owners realize they can't get away with hiding earnings anymore, they need to step up. It's going to be bloody for MLB. And I think the more squabbles between the PA and the owners, the worse it ends up for the game of baseball, the more it hurts the game of baseball. And I just really don't want to see that happen because I love baseball. I want it to continue. But unfortunately, I think greediness and short-sightedness is going to kill this game, and it is already killing this game. The average watcher of Major League Baseball is an old fuck. I'm sorry. But they're doing nothing to embrace young people. They're actively pushing away young people. They're not embracing social media. The whole thing that they want to do of let the kids play, no. Let the kids walk. Let the kids get fired. Let the kids not get paid to play baseball because they are greedy fucks. Things need to fucking change at the MLB Central office.
The quote I saw from Tom Ricketts saying like the scale of losses across the league is biblical. Okay, so you're going to take the losses and now you're going to cut your minor league salaries or just cut players entirely. And if you're the Angels, I'm going to furlough my whole scouting department and allow these scouts right before the draft to, hey, I'm going to go to another team and I'm going to tell them the draft information that you had. Like, bad time. Like, I don't get where. Okay, they're saying these losses. How about taking it from the people that have a lot of money?
Like the owners. Mm-hmm. They could afford losses in a single year. I'm sorry. This is a $10-11 billion industry. They could afford taking losses in a single year for a half a season and do the right thing by their people and expand the game and have everyone look favorably upon the game. But instead, they squabble over pennies.
It's just where we're at right now, and hopefully that by this time next week we have some news that we actually either A, get closer to baseball, or B, we're going to have news that we're not near baseball. And as that happens, the NHL makes up a plan that says, hey, we're ready to go on the end of July, maybe early August, but they announced their plan to resume the season. The NBA sounds like it's going to resume on the 31st of July.
The first major sports league that gets back on TV and is going to have a huge advantage for the next decade in building a fan base.
And that's probably it's probably hockey, which I think is dangerous for baseball because I've said this on the show a couple times, said on my own show, Kicking with Kilo on Full Purse Radio. I fear if baseball doesn't come back or come back quick enough, they're going to end up not where football and basketball is, but right where hockey is. And hockey going right in resumption of the Stanley Cup playoffs would likely jump baseball in popularity in a lot of people's minds.
100%. I agree with you.
Yeah, so that's definitely something to keep an eye, something to monitor. Jeff Passan's been all over it. ESPN, Joel Sherman, the list of who's who, Evan Drellick at The Athletic, they've been all over it. So keep their tweets in mind. And please, if you are trying to follow there, please just do mobile notifications and just set up where they tweet your phone and you're not retweeting fake accounts because it's so easy now. It's 2020. Figure it out. But we wrap up the show this week. Rob, any final thoughts you have on anything this week?
Just everyone check out the new website, sign up for a Dugout membership, and pray we get baseball back sooner than later.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one. I think one for me this week. It was interesting. I was kind of surprised the MLB Network did this, but at the same time, I'm not surprised. It was Derek Jeter's the anniversary, I guess, of his 25-year anniversary of his debut. So they did 64 straight hours of Derek Jeter coverage, which I guess every non-Yankee fan would be like, why you need 64 hours? Like every Yankee fan would be like, why do we need 64 hours of Derek Jeter? Because I've enjoyed watching some old classic MLB Network games, like games I've never seen before. And I've said that on the show before. There were some good games. Like I got a chance to watch a little bit of Game 1 in '96 in the LCS. I guess it's the Jeffrey Mayer game. They had Game 6 of '09 in the World Series. I think Yes has done a good job with airing old games. They actually aired a Yankees losses last weekend, which I was kind of surprised by. But hey, when you get a chance, you can watch Game 7 of 1960 World Series. You air it. I don't care if you lost the game. It's definitely a unique experience. But I just find I was kind of surprised, Rob, by 64 straight hours of one player.
Yeah, I think that's a little overkill. As much as I like Jeter and everything, I just think 64 hours, that's just overkill. That is just called filling in content because we have nothing better.
And I'll give them credit. I mean, I think for the 3 months that they've had to find different programming, I'll be honest, MLB Network's done a really good job. They've mixed it in different days. We're like, hey, we're going to air 4 home run performances. We're going to air classic strikeout game. you don't often see the same game. And they have a lot to choose from, but you'll see different games that oh yeah, I remember that. Like, you won't get the old, like the obvious classic ones. You'll get different ones.
Yeah, and let's be honest, there is, MLB Network usually just does like 3 or 4 hours of original programming a day and then just plays in a repeat, usually.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely during the off season you'll find that. So at least getting a chance, or you're watching games, I think that maybe it's something to incorporate in their actual coverage when next off season, whenever that happens, or hopefully there is a season and there is a next off season. But we'll get into that, of course, down the road. We got a lot to get into next week. You can continue to follow the site at Pinstriped Pros, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Please give us that rating. We hope it's 5 stars. We want to hear from you. Send us your feedback, what you like about the show, what you don't like, any guests you want us to have on, topics you want us to talk about. So feel free to do that. We would definitely appreciate it. Email me, rickjq@gmail.com. Happy to hear from you. We have great, as Rob said, the site's different, looks cool. I love the new layout that Rob put together. As he mentioned, the Dugout membership signups have changed. $5.50 a month, $40, $40 for the year, I believe, right?
40 for the year, yes.
40 for the year, yep. So you can the price have gone down. Use the promo code I Miss Baseball. We also selling cool T-shirts, so get a chance. I know Rob, you want to bring that up, but we have awesome T-shirts with the podcast logo and the site logo. People can buy too.
Yes, if you check out belowthecollar.com/Pinstripe Pros, you can get a Pinstripe Prospects T-shirt. All the money that's raised from that will go to helping the site and keeping the site online. I will be adding links to those on the website. And also, to back up the point about Pinstripe Prospects Dugout memberships, is there's no advertising when you're a Dugout member. All the advertising that we control is gone when you sign up for a Dugout membership. So it makes the site even better to use, even quicker to load when there is no ads running and no intrusive ads on there. Because if you're paying, you shouldn't have to see any ads. And like I said, all the money raised, we need about 500 subscribers to cover our basic expenses, and then 1,500 to make sure we could give our guys a stipend each year. And once we get there, it's going to be a big thing. And we actually kept, instead of canceling our launch contest, we kept the contest going. So once we hit 100 subscribers, we're going to start giving away Game Used Yankees jerseys. So guys, subscribe to a Dugout membership. It's only $40 a year, and you'll have a chance to win some great prizes.
Definitely be sure to check that out. A lot going on, of course, on the site with their MLB Draft profiles. We have Josh Sabo, as I said before, is doing a fantastic job. Devontae Davis, Robert Coles. We have a bunch of different people doing some profiles, so we'll try to get as much of them on the show next week as we can to talk about the draft and talk about some of the big names that the Yankees could be looking to draft. And hopefully with some of these profiles, we get a couple players right and that you'll have read about them before the Yankees take them. So I think that's our goal with this project. We definitely appreciate you checking that out. I know my project went up with all the former Yankee draft picks. So you can read that. I think it's a real awesome read, not just because I wrote it, but I think you'll definitely enjoy their perspective on the changes to the draft this year, and their draft stories are great as well. One other thing I want to mention, of course, you can follow my show, Kicking with Keo, on Full Press Radio. I do it every week. I'm trying to work on getting my episode up this week. I've had technical difficulties with it. So hopefully that'll go up soon. I've reached 30 episodes there, so I appreciate it. I also do some work at Barrett Sports Media, talking about what people have done at ESPN. Basically, if you find somebody that said at ESPN said something crazy or something like that, chances are I'm probably writing about it. So definitely check that out. I've enjoyed doing that for a little bit. And I'll wrap up the show with this. Everybody, please stay safe. Most importantly, I think it's important, just listen. Take a second, shut up, and listen. With everything that's gone on in the world this week, just take a break for a second and just listen to everybody. I think that's just one of the things I want to bring up this week. It's something I've learned this week, and I want to end on that is everything going on in the world. So please stay safe. We'll catch you again next week. James will hopefully be back. Rob, thanks again for joining me on the show. Always appreciate it. From all of us here at Pinstriped Prospects, I'm Ricky Keeler saying have a great week, and I'll see you back here next week to preview the MLB Draft.